Hey folks, welcome once again to Marta's Magical Mystery Class. This week and the next time I record a Magical Mystery Class video, which will be 2 weeks from now, I will be talking about outlining your novel, right? Be excited. We're getting really close to moving into the drafting stage. The previous videos, and for those of you who've watched a few of these, it's obvious by now. Those of you who are just picking this up randomly, I'll go ahead and say these videos are all organized around the notion that they can help you write, edit, and begin to make publishing decisions about a first novel over the course of a year. In this case, about a mystery novel on the sister channel, Marta's Sci-Fi Seminar. It's all about science fiction. The advice is the same on both channels because it's still me giving writing advice, but the examples are going to be different. I do a lot of resource recommendation, a lot of, ooh, I read this and it's great, both in terms of books to read within genre and craft of writing books. The craft of writing books, there will be some crossover, but the book recommendations for specific titles to read in genre, not so much with the crossover. So today and next time on Marta's Magical Mystery Class, outlining. Today we're going to talk a little more about theory and approach in more general terms. I will talk about my own process. Next time I'm going to talk more about tools that may help you for those of you that are more technologically oriented or sophisticated. The first thing I have to say about outlining is that in spite of the fact that I usually have all kinds of book recommendations for you on craft issues, because I love craft of writing books, I realized I don't have a favorite book on outlining. I read one probably close to a decade ago, and I didn't like it. And I've skimmed some others, and I didn't like them. And this brings me to the first kind of theoretical point about outlining your novel. I've said it before, I will say it again. Please do not take my writing advice or anybody's writing advice as written in stone. Every novelist does this differently, and not every novelist recommends doing things the way that they do them themselves. There's lots and lots of ways to scale this particular mountain. So if this writing advice doesn't help you, move along. See if you can find some that does, or carve your own path. So that said, yeah, I think what I realized when I realized I had no favorite book about outlining was that I don't like outlining. I've done it for research papers. I used to be an academic, and I certainly can lay out an argument and can put together all of the points and subpoints and planks and evidence. And I know how to construct great nonfiction arguments that way. But when it came to actually writing books, I did try outlining. Let me say that I outlined and played with and started 7 different novels before the one I actually finished. And then the second novel I wrote in 3 months last year at the beginning of the pandemic. So, 7 attempts over 20 years. The last one that succeeded took 3 years. And then the second novel written in 3 months. So there's, I'm still very much learning as I go here. But when it comes to outlining, my experience was different in both the first and second novels. I was going through a lot of transitions in the first novel, including moving a couple different times. I was stuck at home a lot with the second novel, like a lot of us during the early stages of the pandemic. So I originally thought that to write a book, I had to have an outline. I had to know everything that was going to happen. What I found out in those 6 attempts before the 7th novel that succeeded was that once I knew everything that was going to happen, I didn't care about the book anymore. I didn't want to write it. It wasn't fun for me if I wasn't going to be surprised. I know there's an old quote, no surprise in the writer, no surprise in the reader. I think I feel that way, and I will look up who is responsible for that quotation, and I'll put it in the notes about this video. So what Walter Mosley has said more graciously and Isaac Asimov has said less graciously is that both of them and many, many other writers tend to believe that when it comes to outlining, there are 2 camps. There are plotters, and there are what Walter Mosley graciously refers to as intuitive writers, and he calls the plotters structured writers. Isaac Asimov calls it out as plotters versus pantsers. Writers who plot their way through the book and writers who fly by the seat of their pants through the book. Asimov acknowledges himself as a pantser, and I did find out that is a trending hashtag. And Mosley acknowledges that he himself is an intuitive writer, but they both acknowledge that some structure is good for everybody. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit this week about what some structure looks like without having an entire novel all outlined scene by scene, plot point by plot point. And, you know, like I said, there are books out there that teach you how to do that, and they didn't work very well for me. So I probably am in the pantser camp, if you have to pick a camp. Mosley also is, again, gracious about acknowledging nobody's purely one or the other. Asimov tends to say he's definitely more pantser, and that's what's wrong with a lot of his early novels. And if you've read Asimov's early novels, you know that's what's wrong with his early novels. So what some structure looks like without a lot of structure, for me, is knowing where I'm going. And I do know from the books that I've looked at on structure, even though I've been kind of afraid of the books on outline, is that most people divide a novel up into several big pieces. They'll talk about like acts 1, 2, and 3, or acts 1 through 5, or they'll talk about it in terms of percentages. The 25% point, the 50% point, the 75% point. So you're basically dividing a novel into 3, 4, or 5 big pieces and figuring out what needs to happen at the beginning and end of those sections in order to keep the story moving. For my part, with both the first and second novels, one of the things that both books had in common for me is that I had a pretty good idea where they needed to start, and I had a pretty good idea where they needed to end. In the case of the first book, I knew a little about what the midpoint was going to look like, but that was hazier. With the second book, I knew what had to happen at the midpoint. So going in, I had kind of a very, an outline that would fit on a note card. Certainly for the second novel. For the first novel, I made lots more detailed sketching in of bits because I was forever picking it up and dropping it as various other life things intervened. Right now I'm working on a prequel novella that's got to be a lot shorter than the other two projects, and I'm having trouble because I sort of thought I could pants my way through. Hey, it's just a big short story. You know what? It still needs a beginning, middle, and end, and I still need a map for how I'm getting from one to the other through the center. So I'm learning a lot about myself as a writer as I work on the novella, as I did with the first two books. What I have found useful for providing a little structure in each of those pieces is to keep in mind with every scene that I write that that scene has to move me toward the goal, the ultimate goal where the book is going, and the goal of where the next act starts and stops, the goal of where the next section of the book needs to land. And because I do seem to need some structure, I tend to aim for particular scene and chapter lengths. A lot of my scenes are around 1,200 words or around 2,500 words. Big scenes are around 2,500 words. Littler scenes are around 1,200 words. And those are kind of my standard building blocks as I move through the book. And I know that if I have a big scene, a 2,500 word scene, that's going to be a chapter all by itself. If I have a shorter scene, that's going to be part of a chapter, probably two scenes together that make up a chapter. I also know that when I go back and revise, that's often when I drop in shorter bit scenes that give just a little glimpse into something else that's happening. So as you're reading my work, know that that's one of my tricks, that when you see a really short scene, that scene was probably not original to the draft. That scene probably came in during revision. So we're already at the 12-minute mark because, outlining, right? That is being able to look ahead a little bit and figure out, okay, so to get from point A to point B, and there's only going to be like points C and D and E, I need to have about how many scenes. I need to have these things happen in those scenes, and then I break it down that way. And I like to know a little ahead. Okay, I got to write a scene with these characters in this setting where that happens. But I usually only know 3 or 4 of those scenes at a time. I tend to think of it like driving in the dark on a country road. I can only see as far as the headlights illuminate. And while that's a little nerve-wracking, it's also exciting. I don't know what I might find. I get to see lots of stars. I get to see the outlines of lots of trees as I drive through the country in the dark. Yeah, that is very much the outline experience that has worked for me. I will talk more next time about tools, and if I can dig up some books on outlining between now and then that I think are really gonna speak to a lot of you, I will see what I can do. Until then, you can do some thinking about whether you are a plotter or a pantser. Good way to know. If you feel happy and comfortable having everything pegged out, you're a plotter. If you feel a little anxious and a little like you're hyperventilating, probably a pantser. Have fun.